Hello everybody, welcome back. Good to talk to all of you again. And today I bring you a game in the Hakuryu. And in case you're looking at me and going, but you don't have a Hakuryu on your live account, yeah, I'll tell you how I happened to get into the ship. So I was on the press account showing off the Saipan on the Twitch live stream I was doing today. And somebody was like, "Oh, you should really play the Hakuryu." And I'm like, I haven't actually ever played this thing, at least not much." So, yeah, my first couple attempts, my first, I think, 3 attempts in this game was kind of meh. So this was try number 4, and this one was actually a little bit better. I do apologize, by the way. The replays for carriers is still a little bit jerky. Like, you'll see the camera move and all the names and everything sort of stays in the same place for a few seconds. So, yeah, there's still some issues there that they've got to work out. But, anyways, I mean, it is watchable. You can see what's going on. So, off I go. So, the first sort of 3 battles I played with the Hakuryu, I guess sort of try to play it a little bit like a midway. I try to focus attacks and really try to do damage, and it didn't really work all that well. And so I had to really sort of rethink how I was going to play the Hakuryu, and by this is the 4th battle, I sort of figured out that the Hakuryu required a little bit more, shall we say, it's a little bit more spread out kind of playstyle, where you're doing a lot more sort of smoke and mirrors kind of thing, like a distraction here, an attack seemingly here, while something else is going somewhere else. And it's possible because the Hakuryu has just so many squadrons that you can send them all over the map and do many things at the same time. So what you're going to watch me do here is I have my fighters in the middle. They're tangling with the enemy aircraft. I've got torpedo bombers heading way north. I've got dive bombers that are going to be in the middle. And what this allows me to do is essentially keep the enemy CV guessing as to where my planes are. So I'm not just giving them the easy sort of, oh, I'm all here, and so they can just focus all their fighters into the same place. I'm sort of moving them all over the place where, the CV player is going, okay, maybe it's over here in the middle. This looks like where the fighters are going to be. Maybe that's where the attack is going to be. And then I'll reinforce that with, let's say, dive bombers. And dive bombers will show up, and the fighters for the enemy team will probably say, oh, look, there's the dive bombers, when really something else is going somewhere else, accomplishing a different task altogether. Right now, my dive bombers are essentially serving as bait. They're serving as a distraction in the center. If I can bomb something in the center, great. If I can maybe damage a destroyer or maybe disable a destroyer, then that's the ideal thing. But fundamentally, I still want my dive bombers to act as a bit of a distraction, because what I really want to do is I want to have these torpedo bombers get behind the enemy lines and hit one of their carriers. And the reason I want to hit their carriers is because if I hit one of their carriers and the carrier loses a reasonable chunk of HP, what ends up happening is that I change fundamentally the psychology of that enemy carrier player. The carrier player is immediately going to go, oh, I took some damage there, and I can't really sustain another wave if another wave came for me. And so what ends up happening is that carrier might keep an extra fighter in reserve, keep one fighter back just to keep himself safe. The net result of hitting an enemy carrier at the early stages and then keeping that carrier a little bit more defensive is that it opens up more room in the front lines for me to go attack other things like the battleships and the cruisers that might be guarding those battleships. So I get off a decent wave against this enemy Hakuryu, take him down maybe about 40% of his HP with 5 torpedo hits, and so that Hakuryu now is going to be more conscious that he can't really take another attack wave, and most likely what's going to happen is he's going to be a little bit more passive with his planes. He's not going to send them as far out. He's not going to harass me all the way to the other side of the map. He's probably just going to be like, okay, maybe I should just hold them back a little bit, because who knows, maybe a dive bomber squadron come in. And then this opens me up to attack their team's battleships. And there's quite a few big battleships in Montana, Yamato, there's North Carolina there. So that's a good amount of ships for me to go attack. One other thing, by the way, F Bush, if you ever watched this video, I just wanted to say hi, because you said hi to me in game basically, and you thanked me for the videos, and I didn't actually say anything back to you. So there you go. Shout out to you in the video itself. Alright, so going back to the battle itself. at this particular point in time, as you can tell, most of my aircraft are in the process of getting launched. And the Hakuryu, while it has a lot of squadrons that they do rearm relatively quickly, the launching time is still really, really long if you want to get like all 6 squadrons of attack aircraft into the air. So what I'm primarily doing around this time is I'm trying to group up all of my bombers into their respective groupings, and at the same time what I'm doing is I'm looking at the minimap and I'm trying to figure out where the openings for the enemy team would be. I'm looking to see, is there any particular gaps? Is there a particular battleship that doesn't really have a cruiser escort? And I'm hoping that if I see a gap, then that'll be my next target. The enemy CV's planes begin to make a reappearance here, and I'm looking at the minimap and I'm trying to see what they're doing, and they look like they're just more interested in engaging the Taiho's aircraft, which means that I don't really see them coming after me right away. So what I end up doing, as you can tell, is I've got my dive bombers following relatively close to my fighters. My torpedo bombers are sort of going somewhere else for a little bit. And then hoping to just engage the enemy fighters first with mine, lock them down, take them down. And then, while their fighters are being occupied, go in with bombers and hopefully be able to go in with dive bombers first, cause fire, and then get torpedo bombers after they've burnt their repair. So initially try to go after the Montana, but the cruiser near the Montana pops defensive AA fire, which means immediately that's a no-go. So I pull my bombers outside of that engagement area, and I'm trying to just minimize plane losses. The Hakuryu has only 100 planes maximum, and you will find that unlike the Midway, with the Hakuryu, you will run into situations where you run out of planes. Eventually what happens is I do see the enemy fighters come out, and so I decide, well, if I'm going to lose bombers to the fighters, I might as well just bomb and see if I can get a fire, in which case I do. Strangely enough, the enemy's fighters, which were initially pursuing my torpedo bombers, decide to break away. This part I didn't really understand why they did it, but it gave me the opportunity to sacrifice my 2 somewhat damaged fighters with low ammo to those enemy fighters, and then go after the now much more exposed Montana with 3 squadrons of torpedo bombers. Now this Montana notices that my torpedo bombers are coming and decides to turn out, which is not a very good thing to do, because I calculate the fact that he's going to turn out, still maintaining speed, and with dropping slightly further away, so the torpedoes start to converge, and I'm able to land out of 12 possible torpedoes, manage to land 11 hits, and pretty much take that Montana out of the fight. As not too long after that drop, the Montana gets killed off by the cruisers on my team through a combination of fire and other damage. Now I want you to look at the returning torpedo bomber squadrons, the torpedo bombers I just used to bomb the Montana. They're coming back, but take a look at what's following them. And I'm not sure what happened here. I think maybe one or even both their CVs clicked on my torpedo bombers with their fighters. And so I had 4 fighter squadrons follow me all the way across the map, all the way back to my CV, within the AA range of myself, 2 North Carolinas, and a Yamato. Yeah. And of course my torpedo bombers actually hid into my carrier before they could kill any of them. So yeah, those 4 fighter squadrons got pretty decimated, and they didn't really do all that much. And I think what happened is that there was this huge strike that was happening a little bit to my south, and I think the enemy CVs were just really, really focused on that particular task, so they just forgot about their fighters, and so all of a sudden, yeah, I had all these fighters just follow me home, and a whole bunch of them got killed. One of the enemy destroyers, and it's the Shimakaze, manages to get onto our cap, and so I'm taking a look at the map and I'm like, okay, there's a Shima on our cap, and there's a Shima that seems to be chasing our Taiho. And what I'm trying to do is I'm looking over and I'm seeing that the Taiho is dealing with multiple enemy fighter squadrons. So I'm like, okay, I'll task my fighters to go over there, help out the Taiho, try to take out some of these enemy fighters. And then the Taiho should have the ability to bomb that destroyer and hopefully kill it off without so much interference from the enemy CVs. So I go over there and I help out my Taiho. So as my torpedo bombers have launched, I group them together and I send them into our cap area in the hopes that I'll have to potentially reset that Shimakaze that's on our cap. I strafe. I do kill some of my own fighters, but I do manage to knock out most of that enemy squadron, which was alright. Taking a look around, our cruiser's taking care of the Moskva, and there's the Shimakaze I've got to worry about. Now, with 3 torpedo bomber squadrons, a destroyer is a little bit easier to kill actually, because what you can do is you can do this. You can drop torpedoes from behind, drop torpedoes from the side, and in the event the destroyer tries to turn anywhere else, you have a 3rd squadron there just in case. I hit the Shimakaze with 1 torpedo, and I was going to go for the other run, and then I realized, well, hold on a second, the Shima just got hit by something, and might as well just keep it spotted, so I'll keep this extra torpedo bomber squadron handy in case that the Shimakaze actually gets taken care of by the ships on my team, and then I can actually use this bomber for something else. And there goes the Shimakaze. Looking at the minimap quickly, the next most obvious target is right over there. That's the enemy North Carolina. So I figured, well, I'll just send in the dive bombers first, hit the North Carolina, and then send in the torpedo bomber afterwards. Surprisingly, once again, the enemy fighters passed right by me in their pursuit of the torpedo bombers on my team. So once again, I get a bit of a free run. So there we go, 10 hits, 2 fires, 12,000 damage I think is how much I got out of there. So, you know, Japanese bombers are not as good as the USN ones, but they can still do a respectable amount of damage. I have an extra torpedo bomber squadron, and I'm going to go in there and I'm going to bomb the North Carolina. As it's only a single squadron with only 2 planes remaining, I'm not really super hopeful that I'm going to do like a massive amount of damage. I'm just hoping for maybe like 1 good hit that causes some flooding. And I actually do get 1 hit, and it actually does cause flooding, which is not really all that often these days. Sometimes you'll find that like you can hit 4 torpedoes with a torpedo bomber and not cause any flooding at all. So I guess I was pretty happy that a single squadron with only 2 planes managed to get me a flooding. By this stage of the battle, the enemy team is, well, they're in pretty bad shape. They've lost 1 of their carriers. They're down to 1 carrier. Their battleships are not really doing all that good of a job trying to get together, sharing mutual AA, and pushing, as they're very, very spread apart. In fact, one of their Yamatos, I think, pretty much sat at the back of the battle for most of this battle. Their destroyer was kept lit by one of the torpedo bombers, got killed off, so I'm out here and I'm trying to sort of find that weakness again. I've got 1 torpedo bomber squadron along with 1 fighter squadron. I'm looking around and I'm like, there's an Iowa South. Iowa's AA is pretty strong. There's the Yamato over there, but the Yamato is pretty far away. Ah, heck with it. Let's just go kill the North Carolina. I hit him earlier. I mean, he's not really recovered most of that HP. And 1 good torpedo bomber strike, I think I could probably take care of this North Carolina. So, get on the side of the North Carolina. See that the North Carolina isn't really doing any kind of real evasive maneuver. Get a pretty good drop in there. And 1, 2, 3, dead North Carolina. Good. Begin recovery of the torpedo bomber squadron, start to send out dive bombers. And one of the other things you'll slowly see is that by this stage of the game, I'm no longer concentrating all the torpedo bombers together or concentrating all the dive bombers together. What I'm doing a little bit more is now sort of trying to inflict damage over time, so flooding and fire. And so I'll sort of send off like 1 torpedo bomber squadron along with a couple dive bomber squadrons and try to, you know, flooding first, and then once the person's burned, repair, then go for fire. Instead of the early stages where you really want to maximize damage and minimize losses. By the later stages, because AAs sort of become more thin, ships are not really together anymore, you can sort of go after them individually and try to stack damage over time. So against this Yamato over here, this Yamato is nearly full HP when I first come around. And remember I mentioned earlier, this Yamato really kind of sat at the back of the battle a lot. So decide to punish him for 1, being at the back, and 2, basically not having anybody around him. Going with the torpedo bombers first, again, hoping for that flooding. Flooding is one of the things that most people will pop repairs for very, very early on. Otherwise, you take a lot of damage. First torpedo didn't do anything. Second torpedo, yeah, there we go. There's the flooding. Initially, I was like, oh man, do I really have to go in there with the bombers? Maybe I have to set fires. All right. Managed to get the flooding. I start to do a countdown. So here I am, I'm counting like 10, 9, 8. And the reason why I count down from 10 is because that's how long the battleship's immunity period after they pop repair is. So once you get that and you know they've popped the repair, you do a little countdown for yourself. And so you know exactly when to go in with your bomber. So there we go. In with the dive bombers there, 11 hits, 2 fires. I get my high caliber there, another 12,000 damage. And this Yamato is going to start burning. And he's going to burn for a very, very long period of time. Roughly around this point, the Iowa finally makes it up, and Iowa plus Yamato, that A kind of hurts. I was thinking initially maybe I should just go after the carrier, and then I'm looking at the map and I'm seeing that the other carrier on my team is going after their carrier, so I'm like, might as well not go there and try to add more. I might as well stay here and fight and try to weaken up this Iowa. This Yamato is probably not going to want to fight, so it's probably going to try to keep running away. So I might as well try to get some hits in on this Iowa, maybe soften this Iowa up a little bit for the ships on my team. However, yeah, Iowa A is still pretty deadly as I lose a good chunk of my planes in that last run. Try to pull out this 4th squadron and try to just get more planes stacked up, but by the time I get them out, I'm down to 2 on that torpedo bomber squadron. So I'm starting to run a little bit low, and I'm trying to figure out what the most beneficial thing that I might be able to support my team with, and I'm thinking, well, if I run out of planes, the Hakuryu becomes pretty worthless. So I might as well get into a position, potentially, where I might have an opportunity to ram. Or if the enemy battleships gives me enough space, maybe I can make a run for cap. All this time, I'm already shifting my carrier, and I'm trying to get all of my remaining bombers, whatever I've got left, into as tight of a formation as I can possibly get them, thereby minimizing their time, all these squadrons together, minimizing their time inside the AA envelope, and hopefully preserving as many planes as I can. So I set up on this Iowa. Approach from the side, watch the movement of the Iowa. Is it going to turn in? Is he going to turn away? So it looks like he's starting to turn in a little bit, so I got to overfly that and then come in for the drop. And as you can tell, a whole bunch more of my planes get chewed up, and I only managed to drop, I think, grand total of like 4 torpedoes, and I only managed to hit 2. Still managed to get Confederate, however, did not get any flooding. So without any flooding, gotta go in and try to hit with dive bombers and hopefully try to set some fires. I went a little bit hasty though here. I didn't fully group up everything, and I was hoping that if I stagger the planes a little bit, I would be able to hit. Even if I target the same point, I should be able to hit multiple points along the ship. Almost worked. The last squadron came in a bit late, and I accidentally dropped it into the ocean, so not that good. However, I do make it across to the safety behind an island. I'm still looking at the direction of movement for their ships, and it does look like eventually the Yamato is gonna either just completely stay in cap, in which case I'm perfectly happy to hide in here, or if he continues to sail north, he's gonna eventually intersect me around Echo 4, somewhere around there, and he's gonna run into me, and that might just give me the opportunity to, I don't know, ram him. Have one remaining torpedo bomber squadron, not dive bomber, torpedo bomber squadron, and what I tried to do at the time was I tried to do a really, really, really long range drop, because I was trying to minimize the exposure to the close range AA and trying to keep that one torpedo bomber alive as long as possible so I can actually get a torpedo off. Unfortunately, didn't really work. It was close, really, really close. The Iowa slowed down. Still, with like a minute and 10 seconds left, we're still like 300 points up, so we've pretty much got it. I'm just throwing up whatever dive bombers I've got remaining. I'm just gonna go bomb the Iowa and try to kill it off, and then, really attempt to go for the ram. And I think I had like another minute maybe on top of the time that we have now. I might have actually pulled it off because I actually got somewhat close. Well, I might have died. Who knows? Go in with my dive bombers here. There's the Iowa sailing a nice straight line. Dive bombers go in. There's a hit. There's a fire there. There's some more hits, more fires. Not really paying attention to damage here, because I'm not really paying attention to my bombers really anymore, because I'm like, oh, gonna have to make a move on this Yamato as he's coming up. Yamato secondary is just starting to rain on me. Luckily, he doesn't have the secondary skill, because he had that. It would have been kind of much more lethal secondary fire. But I was happy to charge him down. I had 24,000 HP. It's possible I would have survived it and made it all the way over there, but we run out of time. Plus, my friendly carrier does drop a bunch more torpedoes on the Yamato. So, assuming the Yamato carried on in a straight line, there's a chance I might be able to kill him with maybe secondary guns. I'm being hopeful. I was actually being hopeful at this point in time. But anyways, we ended up running out of time. And for my fourth like battle ever in a Hakuryu was actually pretty decent. Here were the final results. Just over 500,000 credits made, 3,653 experience. I managed to get Confederate, Witherer, High Caliber, 26 torpedo hits, 36 bomb hits, 20 plane shot down. Only 2 ships sunk overall, as I do like to prefer to play more the support role than just outright trying to sink everything. In terms of damage, in this battle, I managed, I think, just a little bit less than 2k shy of 300,000 damage. It was 298,000 something. And so that's not bad, right? I mean, 298,000 damage is pretty respectable in a Hakuryu. And in terms of base experience, I only managed 2,435 because carrier base experience has been nerfed to hell. Anyways, folks, I hope you enjoyed watching me attempt to play the Hakuryu. You know, it's an interesting ship to play. I mean, I haven't really played it. I do look forward to actually getting the ship and playing it more. Aside from all that, thanks for watching and listening to me talk about this ship for the last little while. Have a good weekend. I'll talk to all of you again soon.